Hi and welcome to AskSCW here on SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. Thank you for choosing the channel and choosing the video. Please subscribe right now. Leave any comments in the comment section. Please like and share the video as well. Back once again for the Q&A special. If you want to get involved, if it's the first time watching, then make sure, as I say, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, share with a friend, and if you want to be involved for the next episode, leave the hashtag AskSCW. You can drop in the comments here on YouTube, or you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. You've got all of them coming up on your screen right now of where you can follow me. And in fact, we've got for all platforms today. All three platforms are putting questions this week, so great to see that. Thank you so much to everyone who has got involved. Please like, share, follow each other in the wrestling community. Let's grow as one big, happy family. But without further ado, lots of questions, lots of things to dive into this week through WWE, NXT, AEW, and Impact Wrestling as well on the build to Slammiversary. So lots to get involved with. Let's get straight in with the first question this week coming from Noob and Co. Question 1. What are your thoughts on Io Shirai versus Sasha Banks this week? Question 2. What are your thoughts on Kairi Sane leaving WWE? Do you think her main roster run should have been different? And question 3. Will Asuka and Io Shirai be the team to take the women's tag team titles from Sasha Banks and Bayley? Great series of questions to kick us off, and I think I need to tackle that last. Well, I'm going to tackle question 1 and question 3 together, and then we'll go on to Kairi Sane at the finish. The match this week with Io Shirai and Sasha Banks and NXT, I thought was a very good television main event. I was so pleased we had it without television adverts, and I thought both ladies brought it. I thought that there was a lot to offer there. Bayley was being her annoying self on the outside right now. Bayley, arguably for me, is starting to get go-away heat, but at the same time, I do look and say that she has a role to play, and she is playing that role. So she's supposed to be disliked. I just think maybe it's going to the point where we're seeing too much of it. But we're going on to the match that itself. I thought it was a nice surprise that we got Asuka to come in, and you actually suggested the last week that we could get these two as tag teams to take on each other on the road as we go towards Extreme Rules, or perhaps even further beyond, because we've had the first week of the Great American Bash. We've now seemingly going to have a match on Raw with Asuka and Bayley. Will Io Shirai turn up there? We'll have to wait and see. What I would say, one thing, just a side note on the Io Shirai and Sasha Banks match, I noticed that Dave Meltzer gave it an okay rating, of a stars rating, but actually said that Cody versus Jake Hager from AEW was a better match. I'm not sure what he was watching. I actually think that the women were far superior, and I found Cody and Hager boring from AEW this week. I'm going to throw that out nice and early. I thought that the women was a worthy main event. It was the match that everyone wanted to see. I think it's the reason that NXT won the ratings war this week. I think that is the point where everyone just went, I need to see what's going on with NXT rather than seeing what's going on with AEW. Sasha versus Io is a pay-per-view worthy match, and I do think there is another level these two could take it. I don't think that they brought their best, but I thought they gave us a great television main event, and Bayley and Asuka playing their roles perfectly as well. And it leads to what will come next. And as we said, that we've got that match on Raw. Will Io Shirai turn up on Raw this week? It's a very exciting prospect that she could turn up and become part of that, and maybe, just maybe, they will be involved, actually becoming challengers for the Women's Tag Team Championships. Will they become the next Tag Team Champions? They very well could do. I wouldn't be surprised if WWE switched the belts and put it over to them. My only feeling with it is that, and this is my personal feeling on it and preference, is that we would have the SmackDown, Raw, and NXT Women's Champions involved with the Tag Team Championships, where there's so many other women amongst the rosters that are doing nothing and not fighting for TV time, not really getting a spot, and that could be the championship that really helps create a new start that could be worthy to go up the card and challenge for one of these championships. So personally for me, I want to see less of the double champions, because then we would have, say the belts changed over, we'd have NXT and Tag Team Champion, we'd have Raw and Tag Team Champion. It just feels a bit messy for me. Of course, yes, Sasha could win the belt herself, the Raw Women's Championship, in a couple of weeks, and it changes over, and it's just Io that's the double champion. But we don't know what's going to happen going forward, and I want to see, like I say, people lower down the card that are fighting for that TV time. Whether it's someone like the Iconics, whether it's, Bianca Belair, who's not on TV at all, Shayna Baszler, although I can't really see Baszler in a tag team. But you've got all these different variables of people, Dana Brooke, Carmella, Naomi, lots of people that are just not getting any TV time, and they could do so well with building a tag team division together and really putting a purposeful tag team division and giving people TV time and having something, a purpose for people to fight over when they're not going for the women's championships, because that's what I thought was the purpose of those belts to begin with, was to elevate the mid card, give them something to do, give them a championship, give them a purpose, and build them up to where they go towards the top of the card. So I kind of hope in a weird way that it's a different team that does it. As I said last week, I believe it was last week or a couple of weeks ago, with a question about Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez. I would love that to be the team that did it. But if you ask my prediction of which team I think will do it, I think it'll probably go back to Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. I feel we've seen it though, so I'm not so sure that I'm so keen to see it again, unless they are going to be a team that goes to NXT as well, because they're starting now with Bayley and Sasha to make these belts travel across the brands, defending in all different ways, and mean something. So I'm definitely not critical in that way, but I do feel that there's a lot of TV time being taken from other people that it could be given to, and that argument was given with Charlotte Flair. You could argue that now Bayley and Sasha are being overexposed. Yes, they have those tag team belts, but the idea is to give people TV time, and I think that those belts could be utilised better than being used on someone who already is a main eventer. But I certainly think it's a big money tag team match. I would say it's a safe bet that potentially it will happen. Will it happen before Extreme Rules? We'll have to wait and see. Will it be put for Wednesday for the Great American Bash that we're not aware about? If there's some sort of interference on Raw, we'll have to wait and see. We don't quite know yet, but we do know that Bayley and Sasha will be taking on Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross on SmackDown this next coming week. But I don't believe the belts are on the line on that particular match, so we'll have to wait and see there. Let's talk about Kairi Sane for a little bit before we move on to our next question. I really think that it's a disappointment that she's leaving. Apparently, there's lots of different reports going around, but if we're going on Dave Meltzer once again from his word, that her plan is to be spending more time in Japan with her husband, and that there's no interest in re-signing with the company. She's been injured. She was going to be written off TV in a different way, but Nia Jax kind of beat everyone to it, as famously is done, unfortunately, with Nia sometimes. And we've got to a situation now where it looks like we've seen the last of Kairi Sane for now, and perhaps she will be, doing another company. Maybe she's going to be with Stardom in Japan. It felt like WWE wanted to give her like an ambassador role of some sorts, and that way she could still be in Japan more and be less in the ring. But when you look at it and think of Kairi Sane's career in WWE, she came in and she was someone that you felt the world was at her feet. She had a lot of hype behind her. She won the Mae Young Classic. She had amazing matches with the likes of Toni Storm, Tessa Blanchard, and you thought to yourself that this was going to be a big star in the making. We got to ourselves where she eventually became NXT Women's Champion. She had, I think, a decent run in NXT. I think at times it was still a bit hit and miss in places, but overall, as I say, she got the championship and she did all right. But when she comes to the main roster, arguably, I hate saying it, but when she comes to SmackDown and then to Raw, and you kind of felt like she had a bland tag team throw together with Asuka, and it felt like it was putting Asuka down, it was putting Kairi down. These two could both be big single stars in their own right. When Asuka and Kairi Sane, had that heel direction in the sort of last 6 months of their run with Paul Heyman at the pencil, I was really starting to see a lot more potential and seeing that perhaps it wasn't a waste. But it felt like Kairi Sane was still almost like the feeder person. Asuka was the main person, and Kairi was kind of like the backup act. It kind of never really felt like a full tag team in places. Kairi just was there to laugh and was there to lose on the build, or if they lost the match, it was Kairi that took the fall. It just felt like the belief wasn't there for Kairi Sane. And I do think we're going to look back in time and think, what a disappointment, especially if she does go back to a company like Stardom, for example, and finishes her career there, because I'm sure she'll have some amazing matches to finish that chapter. But we do have to look back and say that we had the Mae Young Classic, we had NXT, we did get to see some of the best of Kairi Sane in her time within WWE's ranks. It's just a shame we didn't get to see it on Raw or SmackDown. Austin Whitley with a great question for us next now. Another old school question for you. Keep those old schools coming in. Take 2005 to 2006 Kurt Angle and put him in the current NXT. Who's his first feud with? Wow. And now let's just go back to Kurt Angle and think of him in 2005 and 2006. 2005, Kurt Angle was having a great series of matches with Shawn Michaels, arguably some of the that WrestleMania match is up there in one of the best ones in history. It was absolute perfection of a match between those two. You look at 2006, Kurt Angle was at a point where he was now going to be leaving WWE, but was involved in the ECW brand when that was brought together as well. So it's very interesting because ECW later did become NXT. So it's kind of as if we would have had that have been where NXT was then. And you look at it and say, well, Kurt Angle was later on in that year, left WWE and then became a part of TNA's Impact Zone. And I mean, Kurt Angle from that point onwards was having killer matches with the likes of AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, the list goes on. So that Kurt Angle was absolutely incredible, was a machine. And to think with NXT, the great matches he could have, you could imagine him in there with the likes of Keith Lee would be incredible. Adam Cole, Tommaso Ciampa, Finn Balor. I don't think we've had Angle and Balor, which would be amazing to watch them two in the ring together. But I have to go with Johnny Gargano as the first feud. I think those two together would be absolute magic. Kurt Angle in that condition. Johnny Gargano seems to have 5-star after 5-star after 5-star match, whether it's Adam Cole, Ciampa, whoever he's against, there's always an epic match against Kurt Angle. I think the two of them together would have been fireworks. So that would be my first option, but I'd love to know your first option in the comments below. And anyone else watching the video as well, let me know who would be your choice for Kurt Angle if he was to join NXT with the current crop of NXT superstars right now, if it was the 2005-2006 Kurt Angle. Let me know right now. Next question comes from our good friends, the hard-hitting wrestling show. Should Tessa Blanchard be signed with WWE? Well, it's a big question, that one. I still stand by what I say with the fact that she wasn't willing to comply with Impact Wrestling. She's been fired from there and stripped of the championship. And I do feel in a way that if you're not going to play ball with the company that you're working with, especially if you're the world champion, and if there are rumours are true of having perhaps a bit of an attitude problem, then you look at it and say that it would be good if she had the ability to learn that lesson before being taken on by another company. But we're going to have to be real a little bit here. Tessa Blanchard is arguably in the top 3 women, in my opinion, in the wrestling world. If you put Tessa Blanchard somewhere, she is money. And if you look at it, WWE and AEW are all in competition, and they're all about making money. And if you want to improve AEW's women's division, you get Tessa Blanchard. WWE are without Becky Lynch, they're without Ronda Rousey, they're now also without Charlotte Flair. They want to make another star. What is the smart move to do? It's to get in Tessa Blanchard. Now, is it necessary to put her in the main rosters of Raw and SmackDown or NXT? Time will tell with that if they were to take her on. But we have to look at it and see from that point of view. And that there is a second side to each story. And it's come out in this last week that Tessa Blanchard, the reason she didn't want to come over to the United States from Mexico, where she spent all the time during the pandemic. Remember, she couldn't come for a long time from Mexico, but now that she can, she doesn't want to be stuck in America because her fiance Daga is in Mexico, and they're due to get married, I believe, later this summer, and she doesn't want to miss out on a wedding. Weddings, they're not cheap things, but for obviously a wrestler, they earn good money as well, and she's a world champion, and she was a representative of that company. I think if you look back at it, I think that belt needed vacating a lot sooner. They should have just done like a 30-day rule, rather than having like this Brock Lesnar rule where, they come and choose when they feel like it, and then they can come and compete and defend the championship. Tessa Blanchard couldn't do much more, and plus she was out of contract as well, so it just felt like she wasn't playing ball, and I think that's what's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. As we say, earlier in the year, and her firing had nothing to do with those allegations with bullying and other stuff, but we don't know fully about that. They're accusations, and I'd hate to turn around and start pointing fingers when we don't know the answers, to that sort of stuff. They're just accusations. But when we look at then Tessa Blanchard, should she be signed by one of these companies? Yes, she should. And why WWE should try and get her is, as we said before, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, Ronda Rousey, none of them are there. Charlotte Flair will be the first back when she comes back, but you are missing 2/3 of that WrestleMania main event of what made that women's division so strong this time a year or so ago. And now that WWE hasn't got any of them currently there, and you could look and say Tessa Blanchard would definitely fill that void because she's a namesake. She's arguably in the best 3 or 4 women's wrestlers in the world, and I will stand by that. I think in ring she's incredible, and she has a lot to offer. I do think of the two companies, I think AEW need her more because of the fact that they could do with someone like her as women's champion carrying that division. I still think they're a couple of names away. They could do with a Kelly Klein, someone like that, just to really enhance them. But WWE, I think that to have her, you've got those matches in place. I mean, could you imagine Tessa against Asuka, Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Io Shirai? There's so many dream matches amongst that. And one comment that was in there from Italian Habs Mike, actually, who I agree with, if she's going to go somewhere, is actually NXT. And he put that actually in the comments of the question there on Twitter, and said like that he feels NXT would be the best home for her because Triple H is someone that could put his arm around and, put her in the right direction. And, let's be fair. I mean, if someone has got an attitude problem in wrestling, she's not the first. She wouldn't be the last. That, if that's the case, and I think that Triple H would put her on a good path. You have to look at people like Randy Orton, Edge. They've rumoured had bad attitudes in the past and they've pulled through. I mean, it's very common in wrestling that people have that kind of vibe. So it's not something new. It's just how it's channeled and it's moved going forward. And I think WWE would be a good place to make her that company person and to get it right. But I do feel sorry for her on the wedding side of things because, you know, I mean, it's you know, you don't want to lose your special day. I totally understand that, but you know, when it comes to a company, I think the whole thing with Impact and Tessa just wasn't handled very well. And I think if we look back to January, obviously no one knew what was going to happen with the COVID stuff and all that stuff. But if someone's in the last few months of their contract, don't put your World Championship on them. I just always think that's a bit messy to do because if they're not going to re-sign, they need to drop the belt, and it just for me isn't something that you know, it could be just done so much differently. I think if you're in the last sort of 6 months of your deal, you shouldn't hold the championship and shouldn't be challenging for one until you've re-signed on that dotted line. I think that's the experience or something that Impact should do going forward, if you were to ask me. But to answer it, I think WWE should. Whether I think they should do it immediately, I would say that I would prefer that a bit of time was left, and I don't think Tessa probably would come because we said there about the wedding, doesn't want to leave Mexico right now. But if we look at it and say in 6 months' time, a year's time, I can see she's going to be back with one of these two companies. And for me, I'm more of a WWE guy than I'm an AEW guy at this point in time. I would be much more invested in seeing Tessa against the likes of, as we said, the Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Bayley, Asuka, Io Shirai. That really does more. The only one I would really want to see Tessa face currently when it comes to AEW would be, you know, Hikaru Shida. That would be the only arguably dream match that I would want to see there. The rest with like Anna Jay and the rest of, you know, the Knockouts Penelope Ford, they would be just stepping stones for me for Tessa to run that division, in my personal opinion. Mike, Italian Habs Mike, with our next question now. And with Jericho posting the NXT spoiler on his Facebook page, will more fans tune in than usual this Wednesday? And second, will this be a turning point of the Wednesday Night Wars where NXT will win more? Great question. I really like that question. I think it really comes down to a lot of different variables because you're kind of going off there on what WCW did there in the mid-90s, and it basically, they shot themselves in the foot and they lost a lot of viewers on that particular night when they said that Mankind was going to win the WWF title, and it was a turning point in the Monday Night Wars where WCW never won again. NXT and AEW have been doing the Wednesday Night Wars, and AEW have been winning pretty much dominantly throughout the whole process. It's only the last couple of weeks that NXT have won consistently a couple of weeks in a row. I think they've won maybe a week here or there in between. So let's say NXT's won 4 times since this started. This could be a point where people say, I need to tune in and see what's going on with NXT. I should say, I have avoided the spoiler. I believe it was one of the new NXT tag team, which the name escapes me right now, but it was them that posted it initially, so it was their mistake to actually post something like that on their Instagram account. Very stupid thing to do. It gives everyone the result of what goes on. We hate spoilers, we don't want to see them, and I'm sure that this was done of a little bit of naivety, not realising that perhaps that this has not gone out yet, but this could be something that sees that tag team punished, which is a shame really, because they looked like they were going to a certain direction. I feel really bad that the name escapes me right now, but I'm sure someone will let me know in the comments section. But when you look at it and then say that Jericho took that, it was already kind of information that people were aware about. It had got the dirt sheets and going to different places. Was it wrong of Chris Jericho to post it? I mean, I think so, personally, just because of the fact that maybe Jericho says what's in the news anyway. No one really loses anything out if it's already out there. But at the same time, you know, we do have this NXT AEW thing going on, and a lot of people are saying that, well, you know, the ratings war doesn't mean much. I think for these two companies, it does mean something, and I think it means more to AEW. I'm going to go out there and controversially say that. I think for them, because they are seen as the little fish taking on the big fish, they feel David in this David Goliath situation, and they feel so great that they've won so many weeks, and I think it's given them that purpose that where maybe they thought they'd maybe start off on a losing end and have to build up to something, they now feel like that they have the competitive edge and will do what it takes to keep that competitive edge. You already see when the ratings come through and AEW is not happy, Jericho will go and say, well, the demographic that matters is, you know, the 18 to 49s, and that's where we win, and it doesn't matter with the over 50s. Television companies don't care about that. Well, I mean, NXT has more viewership, and I think that for me, that's what it would come down to if I was a TV network. I wouldn't necessarily care where it's coming from. But it's always good to know that the young audience is invested in what you're doing. But if the overall audience is bigger, then that's surely still okay in my book. But is it a bit sour grapes? I would argue and say yes, it is. Is it something that's going to give people watching NXT more? I mean, I suppose it depends on the result. As I say, I've avoided the spoiler, so I'm going to do a what if. So I don't know if people are aware watching it or not. But if Keith Lee is the guy that wins and wins both belts, I would say that would be a reason that people would want to tune in and see that, and I think it would be a detriment. I mean, it could be as well if Adam Cole wins it as well, but at the same time, I do kind of feel that if Adam Cole was to be the guy that was to win it, I would say it would affect the ratings less. I think Keith Lee winning is the bigger draw to invest fans to tune in more, because Keith Lee is someone that I think a lot of people, including myself, I say every week, this is another week I'm going to say it again, Keith Lee should be on Raw or SmackDown challenging for the main championships. The guy has it, and I think he is a potential someone that can carry the company for the next 10 years. And I think that a lot of people see that, and I think a lot of people would be on board with seeing Keith Lee winning both belts. If I had to predict right now, which I suppose that's had a little flavour to it, I predict Keith Lee probably will. But I've not seen the spoilers. I actually think in some ways it makes sense if Adam Cole was to win both belts, because then you finally got that North American Championship off of Keith Lee, and he can just challenge for the main championships rather than having a mid-card belt. So, I mean, as I say, I don't know. I'm flitting backwards and forwards, but I think it will help the ratings for NXT. If I look at AEW as well, and this is another key factor, Jon Moxley versus Brian Cage has been taken off of next week as well. So the fact that still a spoiler has come out, AEW's lost the match and had to put it the week after for now what they're doing Fight for the Fallen. I think that people are going to be watching NXT. I think it's going to be a clear victory for NXT this next week, whatever happens. So if people know the result or not, I don't think it matters. I think NXT will pick up the victory. But I do think it was a bit salty. I think it was a bit naughty. And we'll have to wait and see. Time will tell if NXT will take this here and continue on throughout. It felt at Christmas, just as a finish off for this, that NXT had taken it, where they were going to be going over December 18th episode. Ironically, my birthday, by the way. But when Rhea Ripley beat Shayna Baszler for the NXT Women's Championship, that week was the week that they sort of got the victory over AEW, and it felt like at that point that they were going to continue the momentum. But then we had the Christmas episodes where it was kind of like these year-end awards and just odd little pre-recorded matches, and it felt like people went back to AEW, and it was almost like they had to start again. It was like the wrong week that they kind of got the victory. But now that it's happened at this point, now we're in sort of like the middle of the year, there is a way that momentum can carry, and it can become a point where NXT, for example, gets maybe 900,000 fans viewing a week, and AEW gets 500,000, 600,000. There is a way it could be like that, but we are at the sort of similar numbers these two companies had pre-pandemic, so it just shows which side is going to win each week. But as we go into this next week, I do expect it to be NXT. Let's move on to Impact Wrestling questions. And we've got Chris Daly, my good friend Chris Daly. How are you doing, mate? He's asked a question for us now. Who do you think will be in the new Aces and Eights? Great question. And we look at that, and of course, Impact Wrestling teased it a couple of weeks ago, and Dino had the waistcoat on the chair, and it feels heavily now that we're going to get the Aces and Eights back, and to what format. Now, I will do a nice little cheap plug here, because I think it's a good time to do it. I did a video this week on 10 ideas of how people could debut or return into Impact Wrestling, and with this, of course, Aces and Eights was one of the ideas. So, you get a spoiler, but you've got 9 different new ideas if you want to go and check that video out right now. But Aces and Eights was one of them, and I didn't have a full stable of this point, but I did suggest that, of course, Bully Ray is no longer now with Ring of Honor. He's actually been away from there now, I believe, since April, so he is probably free to do what he wants. He could come back here into Impact Wrestling. I think that would be the most likely destination for him. He does Busted Open Radio, which I believe is with Tommy Dreamer as well. They're very good friends, go a long way back. It wouldn't surprise me to see D'Lo Brown as like the manager pushing forward Bully Ray, leading the charge then from a superstar perspective, and we could have Carl Anderson and Doc Gallows involved there as the beginning parts of that stable, because those two are supposedly the most likely to have already signed with Impact, and it will be at Slammiversary in some format. So that would be, for me, the dream start to that stable. I believe Wes Briscoe has been on Twitter saying, where should he go next? AEW, Impact Wrestling. He's trying to put some feelers out for himself. Would he come back into Impact Wrestling to be part of Aces and Eights once again? Would be interesting to see. Would we get more members? I mean, we could take some of the current crop of what we've got and rebuild this stable and make it fresh and new. Carl Anderson, as we say, has not been in Impact before, so he kind of would already be a new name, but with his association with Doc Gallows, would fit very nicely into that stable. So that's currently how I would do it. I'd start as a 4-man stable, and then we could always build it further from there. But I'm really excited with the prospect of Aces and Eights potentially coming back. I think that it would bring a lot more of the casual fans back to Impact Wrestling that were involved in those days back then, because there was a higher viewership back in the day when Aces and Eights was going. That storyline started off really red hot. Some argue that it soured off towards the end, but when you look at it and say that if it was to make a comeback now, I think that people would be invested in it, and I certainly would as well. So would we get it at Slammiversary? It's too early to tell, but I'm certainly would be excited to see if it was to come into place and fruition. I think that that would be the best way to restart that stable for me. Another question from Chris Daly. We're carrying on with our Impact Wrestling this week. Do you think Trey deserves to be in the Slammiversary main event? Very good question here. Trey, for me, it's going to be a bit harsh in this one. I'm going to say no. But from a storyline perspective, yes. I mean, he was in the supposed to be in the finals of that tournament, and he didn't get the opportunity. So yes, from a storyline perspective, he should be in the match. But I do not see Trey as main event level in Impact Wrestling. I have to be brutally honest. I don't actually see him in the top 3 or 4 of the X Division, let alone the main event. And that's where I feel I'm being harsh here, because Trey is an incredible athlete, and they have some incredible wrestlers. But from a believability standpoint, I just don't see with the gimmick and with Trey, I don't see him as a main eventer. I think for mid-card, perfectly fine. I think he's got a great role within the company, and I think that he does great work, he does great matches, and I like to see what they're going to do with the Rascals. I think the X Division Championship would be the best place for him to go for, but like I say, you've got stars like Willie Mack, you've got, okay, Rich Swann is injured at the moment, but Chris Bay's come in, set the world on fire. TJP, for me, he's wasted in the tag team with Falaba. He should be in the X Division program as well. And you look and say that Trey, I think, fits in amongst that, and with Ace Austin as well. Ace Austin is someone that I think is more main event level of the two, even though he's an X Division wrestler. He's got Madman Fulton now in his corner, kind of got the Shawn Michaels Diesel relationship kind of going on with there. But when you look with the Rascals, I mean, they've kind of got this kind of stoner gimmick going on. And I don't know, they've kind of tried to break Trey away from it a little bit this calendar year. He's kind of gone on this much more of a singles program, the program with his mum, with Ace Austin, and now he's sort of challenging more towards the top end for the championship area. I don't fully believe in it with Trey, personally, but I do think the guy's an incredible athlete as well. Like I say, right now, even I'd probably don't put him as the top of the X Division either. I would have him in that X Division category. I think that that's the best place for him right now. In time, who knows? But for me right now, I just don't see him as a main eventer. But for storyline purposes, and the fact that it's a 4-way at Slammiversary, okay, I can accept it. But I would probably not be the happiest if he was to actually win the championship at the end of the evening. Sorry, Trey. So, continuing on with our Impact Wrestling questions here. We've got Tire World Order Express now, and a quite lengthy question for us this week. So, it looks like we're going to see Dreamer in a ring at Slammiversary. I understand the circumstances and why this has to happen, despite some fans not wanting Dreamer on a pay-per-view match, be myself included. However, what do you think are the chances that this was the plan all along? Could Dreamer be the final boss before Moose leads a TNA themed faction against Impact? If so, is this a good idea, and what do you expect out of a Moose Dreamer match at Slammiversary, not including an Extreme Rules stipulation? Duh. Well, I mean, that's a great question there for us. I do feel that if Tommy Dreamer was to be in a match with Moose at Slammiversary, that you couldn't lead that faction there and then. It would have to be something that would build something further down the line. Like you say, in the Extreme Rules environment, Tommy Dreamer does them every time he's in the ring, so it's not really something new and something different, something special. I personally think it's a lackluster match for the pay-per-view. Now, don't get me wrong, Tommy Dreamer can do an incredible promo. The guy still is great on the mic. But my feeling is that I see too many tears, and I see this style of Tommy Dreamer promo every time he talks. Therefore, I start to believe that I connect to it a little bit less, because when I see Dreamer kind of get emotional and say how someone's incredible, this, that, and the other, and then turns it, like, it's a great promo, but I just feel that I don't know. I see the tier works too much from Dream, and it makes me turn away. I have to be brutally honest. But yeah, in 2020, Dreamer can still do a match. He can still do hardcore matches. But I think if Moose really is meant to be the TNA heavyweight champion, which at this particular moment, even though it's not as a registered championship, that it's, you know, it's meant probably the highest championship within the company, he needs to have a different level of an opponent. But maybe it can be a level of respect, and that's what it could lead to going forward. Maybe it's a match where Dreamer, you know, is seeing if Moose really has it underneath. Like, you know, is he the guy that he claims he is? Is he really the TNA World Champion? He beat me in the match, and then when it's unveiled that Dreamer is that leader later on. I mean, I'm really a fan of the idea of a TNA versus Impact Wrestling idea. As I say, with the video that I did this week of the ideas, again, spoiler alert, another one of the ideas that I put out was an idea that we could have a TNA faction with Moose against Impact Wrestling, almost like a WCW versus NWO style feud or a Nexus style takeover, which I think would be pretty awesome. And if you did have that where Dreamer kind of said, well, Moose prove something to me in that match, and it built something further down the line, it could be something pretty exciting. And from there, from a storyline perspective, it would work and it would become very acceptable very quickly. So, from a match between these two, I'm sorry to say it's probably a very bland answer, but I wouldn't expect much. Moose should be dominating that match. Maybe that's the way that they can make that match work. I mean, Tommy Dreamer, as I say, we go back to the tier works. He actually is some of his best work usually is with that. I mean, seeing Tommy Dreamer, an old beaten down man, just completely annihilated, but Dreamer doesn't want to give up, probably would be a good road to go down with this match, if they were to have this match. And maybe that's the way of doing it. Not the fact that Dreamer was just beaten, but he was dominated, and that he really is the future and represents everything that TNA actually was. And that's why he's leading this new faction that comes in, perhaps maybe then later in the night or something, or it leads to different storylines later on. Or it could be just the fact that we start with Moose, with these TNA guys coming in, destroying, you know, the end of this main event, the new champion or whatever, and saying TNA is the brand. And it's later on as if Tommy Dreamer's like the higher power. Oh God, we're going back to the Attitude Era of Vincent Mann, aren't we? But literally, I mean, that could be a very good road to go down. So there's definitely layers if that was a storyline to work through. But I would have to say that the initial match would be very lackluster, in my opinion. Next question goes to my good friend Mervyn, the Mr. 1925. More of a talking point than a question. Do you ever feel that in wrestling time moves so much faster when little change as opposed to the early days? For example, Stone Cold's entire main event career lasted just 4 years, felt so much longer. HBK was out of his back injury for 4 years, and when he came back, it felt like an eternity. 4 years in WWE now goes in a flash. Roman Reigns has been the guy for 6 years now, with little or no change in the direction of the product or roster. A 6-year period in the 90s would have seen an entire roster changes and changes in the product. Is it just the internet world we live in feeling like everything is moving faster and no change, or do we think wrestling has just become stale with no fresh direction in sight? That's the question, that's the talking points, and arguably, I cannot argue with anything that's been put on that. We have to look even further. You're saying about things lasting a long time. Let's go into some of those points. Steve Austin was in that main event role for 4 years. Let's not forget, in 1999, he was written off with an injury, a run-over angle, where he was missing for 10 months. He then, in 2002, had a fallout with the company where he didn't want to jump in a qualifying match to Brock Lesnar in the King of the Ring and was missing for another 8 months. So Steve Austin, on that main event run that you're talking about, that lasted an eternity, or felt like a very long time in those 4 years, he actually was missing about 14 to 16 months off of that period where he wasn't around. And things were going on, and like you say, The Rock was up there, and Triple H was up there. Things were always evolving, things were always moving, and arguably in that time, I don't think, although we had like Steve Austin as the one star, we had other stars building up as well. Shawn Michaels, like you mentioned, the back injury and the career ending was gone for like 4 years. And yeah, like you say, so much changed. And I suppose at that point, was such an evolving product because of the fact that we had different companies as well. No one's on WWE's level, and I think that's the big difference between then and now. Back then, there was WCW, there was ECW, and eventually WWE acquired both, took all the best of their superstars, built their own stars up, took these ones that were already ready-made, and they had a ready-made roster to run with for about a good 10 years, and they had their odd one or two come through, like CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, Kofi Kingston, who's still around, doing his thing now as WWE champion last year. And you look and say, like, those guys were kind of building their way up. And we get to the point where we've come into the last decade, the 10s. And like you say, we got the Shield. And outside of that, we haven't really got much. And if you look, even in comparison with TV program, we've got more time to build new stars now, but yet we had less TV time then, and everything felt longer, more meaningful. The internet, I think, has a bit of a part to play, because I think that we, as fans, are very quick to judge on what we see. I think we're very quick to turn around and say that this is a star, they should be pushed to the top. And sometimes when they get there, or that doesn't work, we need them back down, or we sell on something that we want. WWE with Roman Reigns has felt the need to delay a lot of his pushes and a lot of his builds, because a lot of the internet was not willing to accept him as the guy. WWE doesn't have the competition, as we mentioned earlier, really. If you look at AEW, it's not yet competition. We're probably a long way away before we can get to where AEW would be Monday Night War territory. And you look at it and say that as well, the other big difference was the Attitude Era was TV14, was more arguably at the demographic of the teenagers to the 30-year-olds, who are those are the diehards that are still there now, kind of hoping that things are going to get better. Where now we've kind of got the family environment, and when I first became a fan, we were in the family environment, and you could argue that it's because of the fact that a lot of the top stars that had been around carrying the company for 7-8 years at that point had gone, and we went through the new generation, and we were building these mid-carders that were Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and then we got like Razor Ramon and Diesel before they left for WCW, and we kind of had this kid-friendly environment that was then kind of doing what's going on now. Ratings were dropping, people were being less invested, and it was only when someone gave a big kick up the backside in WCW, giving a more realistic programming and something that people were invested in dying to see. I feel that now within WWE, at this particular moment is this is the year that they've kind of come away a little bit from PG. We're getting a little bit more with naughty language being thrown in here and there, and perhaps you could argue with certain segments. If you look at, say, like Seth Rollins with the Monday Night Messiah gimmick, what he's done with Rey Mysterio, putting the eye on the steel chair. The problem is that you can have these big moments, but they don't feel that they lead to anywhere. And I think that that's one of the big components of why we kind of stand in the standstill, is that things happen, but there's not so much reasoning. The product, like you say, has potentially become stale because the direction is not clear. Are we going for a family-friendly product? Are we going for a TV14 product? And we've got mixture of bits throughout the shows, which then puts a bit of a mixed direction. Raw for me is too long. I've gone over that in previous times, and I think that means it's hard for fans to keep that investment in 3 hours. You have to really stretch for segments and for writing, for ideas, and you can come up with a really good Raw for 3 hours, but then you look and say, well, then I've got to do that for next week, and I've got to do it for SmackDown, I've got NXT in the middle. Back then you had Raw, and that was it. You didn't have to worry. It was 2 hours of programming. Yeah, you had your wrestling challenge or your superstars or whatever, but it was kind of like a throwaway hour where things didn't matter. You got into then where it was like the end of the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era, and you kind of got your Raw, and you had your SmackDown, which you had your 4 hours of TV, and then you had the throwaways of Velocity and programs like that, and it's just, I think that now everything means something all the time. We still have Main Event and 205 Live, which arguably means nothing, but you've got writers all the time trying to make different new content all the time, and if you pull that together, it's about 9 hours of programming each and every week, and I think that it just becomes a point of where things are clustered. And I think that where one other major direction is also Vince McMahon at the top. He's getting older, and maybe his ideas are not as in touch with what maybe a younger audience wants today. And I think that also the start-stop pushes is something that I've mentioned heavily in previous things. Helps it doesn't help, it halts where the direction of something of where it's going. If someone is being built up for 3 or 4 weeks, Bobby Lashley is the most recent example. He's been built up for Backlash, had a really good 6 weeks, and now he's just in the background watching MVP go for the United States Championship. It just, you go straight off a cliff. Ricochet had a great start, great Royal Rumble, was built up for a championship match against Brock Lesnar, destroyed in about a minute and a half, and now Ricochet is not seen anywhere. And it's just things like that that really just make me think we're going nowhere, because we're not building those new stars, and that's what needs to be done. We're not, we've got NXT, which is supposed to build those new stars. Half of them stars don't want to come up to Raw or SmackDown now because they've seen what happens to the others. And again, it can be a casual thing against a hardcore fan base thing, but a lot of it comes from writing. And if writing was to actually come through to us and say, this is the direction we're going, and this is what we want to see, and we're going to want you to see it like this, the chances are the fans will get more on board than not. If I like to look at things from a storyline perspective, and I sometimes think something doesn't play out that well on TV, but I still turn around and go, do you know what, I didn't mind that, because I saw where they were trying to go with it, and I get from the storyline it makes sense, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, you look at it from a perspective is that, some people don't look at it like that and don't want to look at it like that. And even though I'm willing to sort of turn a blind eye to some things because it didn't come across as well, even though that's how they wanted it to, doesn't, you need to make sure that the writing is better. It's no good like someone like, as I say, myself, that can turn a blind eye. I don't want to keep turning a blind eye. I want to be wowed every single week. And I know many fans that feel the same, that will say, look, this was the plot hole with this, and this. And I've got friends that will talk to me about that. And I think that they come with some great points each and every week. And, you just look at it and say that they need to have a clear direction of what they want to do, where they want to go. And if this is the superstar they want to push, they need to push them. That's the superstar. That's the one. Whether fans go with it or not, we need to go with this for like 6 months to a year. And if it doesn't work, like Lex Luger arguably didn't work in 93 going through to 94, then we'll pull the rug and this guy will go to the mid-card. Because if you do it every 3 or 4 weeks, I don't know who I'm meant to be invested with and who I'm not meant to be invested with. WWE arguably has too many talents on their books, and that probably is another reason what this comes down to. You look at it and say that they released superstars during the pandemic. You arguably say that they've still got too many on their books. But at this particular point, they need to start thinking, who is the top, who is the middle, who is the bottom, and keep it in that ratio for a good length of time. I still think they've got a lot of the rosters mixed up, and I think that they could really do a good hand in having a draft. Despite the fact some people in NXT are new in, I think that they're too good for being in NXT, and that's not a disrespect on the NXT brand. It's just I think they can carry the company. If it was up to me, I mean, when Roman comes back, he stays in that top spot because he has been the guy, but he needs new people to work around with. I'd love a Roman Reigns heel turn. I think it would be interesting to see and a viewing point from there. And I think that if you have him alongside of Drew McIntyre, who they actually are putting time in, I think that it can build and it can lead to something. Drew McIntyre will benefit more than not from the push he's had from the last 6 to 8 months. Keith Lee needs to be in that spot. I think that Karrion Kross is someone that could be in that spot. I love The Fiend with the work he's doing. Aleister Black has the potential to get up there. Seth Rollins should be around that area. Dexter Lumis is a character for me that should be heel, but that heel character could really work. I'm not sure about his in-ring work. I think his match with Roddy Strong this week was a bit long and a bit boring, but I think if it was used correctly and used to his strengths, and I think, not to go on to another point, I've spent a very long time talking about this. I hope I'm not boring you to death, but like literally, if you play to a superstar's strengths and not to their weaknesses, I think that there's more chance as well that they connect, and I think that that's what you need. You need something to connect with the audience on a writing standpoint, from a character standpoint, and see a clear direction. Does WWE want to go for a kid's direction? Do they want to go for an adult direction? Do they want to blur the lines? As long as they make it clear with their superstars of what they're pushing forward and make it really clear to the audience of what they want to do, there is a chance we can buy into it. But like you say, for the last 6-7 years, they've just gone with match, match, match. Storyline doesn't really mean a lot, doesn't elevate the superstar anywhere, and sometimes when they get that moment, they get their brass ring, they just forget what to do with them next, and it's pushing the momentum on further. They don't do that, in my opinion, and that's why we're stuck in a rut, and that's why time, like you say, is just flying by. You could turn around and say that we were kids and we're younger and time goes longer, and maybe, that's also another reason why. But I do feel that, like you say, things felt like an eternity because things were always evolving. Ironically, WWE gets evolved as a purchase evolved this week, but things were always evolving. Characters were always coming around. They turned face when they needed to. They turned heel when they needed to. They changed a gimmick here and there if they needed to tweak the character. They knew the time where they had to change and mix things up. rather than being stale. And WWE right now just goes with the casual. They've got no competition. They've got no need to do it. But the ratings are dropping, and they're not seeing why. And they need to see why. And I think that is the big issue with the company right now. Dan the Man Williams for our next question for us now. What modern gimmick that failed that you would bring back and think would get over? For me, the 2013 Fandango would get everyone fandangoing in the arena and would get the crowd up for the events. Yeah, I mean, I liked that back in the day as well. I thought that was really good. For me personally, Fandango, still, I love the Breezango work that they do together. I think that they could bring that part into the gimmick once again. The fashion files, it was a lot of fun back in the day. We don't get that as much. I do like the work in NXT at the moment though, but I get where you're coming from. But for a given answer, we kind of touched on something like this last week with all time of gimmicks, and mine was around 2014 with the Bad News Barrett gimmick, and I thought that would be something that shouldn't have been dropped and could have got over and would have been brilliant. But I mean, looking now, I mean, Rusev Day was one as well. That was one. I just don't understand why he didn't become a mega star. You know, carrying the momentum. Sometimes superstars, we talked about a lot in the last question, but superstars sometimes get over organically. And WWE need to see this as well. And it's such a key component that Rusev got over organically with Rusev Day. You know, and Rusev has a way of coming up with these great little catchphrases and great little sing-alongs, which, I mean, to be fair, they're kind of like a dad at a wedding, really. They're not really pinpoint perfect, but because of the fact that they're not pinpoint perfect, we kind of get involved even further in. I would have loved to have seen Rusev Day blossom to what it could have been. Unfortunately, it just wasn't to be. So for me, Rusev Day would be my answer for you on that one as a gimmick. With a modern day WWE superstar, I think Bobby Roode, I think, would be the key example. If you look at Bobby Roode's work in NXT, where he was kind of like the rich guy, the heel gimmick, you know, he was like a main event gimmick in NXT. That's something that could have actually gone on to Raw or SmackDown at the time and could have been successful. They just completely ditched all that when he came in and became just glorious Bobby Roode was at the face, and then had no personality, no mic time, no gimmick, and now is just a follower and a part of a tag team here and there when it needs to be filled in. So for me, from a current superstar standpoint, Bobby Roode would be my guy to give you an answer there, because I do think that Bobby Roode, that gimmick in NXT was golden, and in fact, if it was up to me, I now would send him back to NXT and go back to that gimmick, because I think that would really revive the character and give Bobby Roode a second chance, because the guy is money, and I feel it's a crying shame that what we've seen with Bobby Roode, it's really been a very lackluster run for him on Raw and SmackDown over the last few years. Next question comes from Joseph Ashcraft. Was WWE really upset with the Taz promo? Well, I believe so. It feels like it was. The sloppy shop comment, I think, was the one that really got to them. I mean, if we look at everything and connect the dots together, it was very tastily done in the promo, you could say, with that sort of blurred line of reality of saying, John Moxley, well, why are you not there? You've taken COVID tests, you know, and you could be coming in, you'd be tested, you've come across negative so far, you'd be tested again here, so you're just pulling out of the match and delaying it further, when really we know that it's the right thing for people not to take precautions, and things have been done in tape batches. But by doing that promo, of course, we have to look at the John Moxley's wife is Renee Young, and Renee Young is someone who has come in contact with COVID-19, along with what has been rumoured up to 24 or 2 dozen WWE superstars or talent or people. But we know Renee Young, Kyla Braxton, Adam Pearce and Jamie Noble are the people who have announced that they did come into contact with COVID. That has been announced, but a lot of stuff has come from PW Insider on that information. So yeah, WWE don't want that information getting out. They don't want to be seen as someone that's been sloppy and not handling things correctly with this. Some people have their opinions of whether they think this has been handled well or not. The fact clearly that now we're starting to see face masks in the arenas now with tapings, that there are meant to be fines now if people aren't wearing their face masks, stuff like that. We can see a bit more of a zero tolerance now from WWE, perhaps a better way forward from them than perhaps what's been going on previously. But yeah, it looks like that there was a bit of upset with that. It's not a comment that's been taken too nicely. But you know, AEW will take a shot where they feel they can take a shot, as we said in the last question. You know, there looks to be shots being fired from AEW in places here and there. And they've done that throughout the whole run, that they sometimes do take on board what's going on with the competition. It's almost very WCW-esque. You just hope it doesn't come back to bite them at a later date. But I think a lot of the AEW support I think they get a bit of a kick out of it. And with some of the stuff, I must admit, I get a kick out of it. I mean, I thought Taz's promo was fire this week. I thought it was awesome. And it sort of hits some home truths. And we don't want to see anyone, feeling rough with what's going on with the COVID stuff, but we want to see health and safety with our wrestlers, and we want to see people in the safest possible conditions. And, I'm not there in WWE. We can only go on the reports that we've read, but it feels like going forward, that if there are more proper tests now for COVID and more face masks and more distancing stuff actually going on, and perhaps we don't have as big of rosters, we have smaller rosters to work with and stuff like that, it perhaps feels that perhaps it's going to be a better environment going around. But yeah, there certainly was some unrest and unhappiness with the Taz promo, yes. Last question this week comes from Evil AC. Who was the best oddity and why? Love a throwback question. We're going back to the 90s, the oddities. Of course, we had Kurgan, we had Golga, and we had Giant Silver. I believe Insane Clan Posse was around with him for a period of Luna Vachon. Just something about Golga. He had the Eric Cartman cuddly toy. He had the mask. He was probably the best one of the in-ring of those guys. So yeah, I mean, it was a fun... He was fun when he was around. Everyone kind of got invested behind what was going on. And like I say, South Park was massive at the time as well. So I think Golga would be my choice for that one. But that's all from me anyway this week anyway for Ask SCW. I've enjoyed everything as always. Let me know your comments in the comments below of any of the topics we've discussed today, having discussed in further length with you in the comments. Make sure to drop a hashtag AskSCW if you want a question for the next episode. And make sure to check out all the latest uploads that have been coming on the channel as well, including my 10 ideas for the WWE releases, maybe to debut or return to Impact Wrestling at Slammiversary. Who's going to show up, why, and what ideas are there? We've touched on perhaps one or two of them in this video, but you can touch on all the ideas that I brought on in that video. But that's all from me. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time here on SCW. Please like, share, subscribe, share with a friend, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.